The civil war in Sudan has hit a new low in terms of humanitarian suffering. This past week, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces captured the city of El Fasher in North Darfur from the Sudanese army. After a brutal 18-month siege, RSF fighters have left a trail of blood and looting throughout the city. The World Health Organization said it was appalled and deeply shocked by reports of the killing of 460 patients by paramilitary forces on Tuesday at a local maternity hospital. The United Nations has condemned the violence. New satellite images obtained by the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab show evidence of mass graves in the city, with discoloration suggesting a bloodbath and the deliberate targeting of civilians in the city. The UN's top relief official points to the evidence, saying it, quote, shows, quote, blood on the sand in El Fasher and blood on the hands of the international community. Analysts warn that the 2-year-long civil war, which has triggered the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world today, is being fueled by regional powers who are backing opposite sides of the conflict. Egypt and Saudi Arabia support the Sudanese army. The United Arab Emirates back the RSF. The International Rescue Committee lists Sudan as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world today, with nearly 30.4 million people in need inside the country. Now, many warn of another genocide in Darfur, where 2 decades ago, an estimated 250,000 people were killed during fighting in the region. Joining me now is David Miliband. He's the president and CEO of the International Rescue Committee. It's a global humanitarian aid, relief, and development NGO. He's the author of Rescue, Refugees, and the Political Crisis of Our Time. David, I mean, this is you and IRC have been talking about these issues for a long time. When you're at a five alarm emergency, I mean, it's hard to comprehend what's happened in the last week or so.
Well, thank you for giving some attention to this crisis, Ali. I'm afraid it is shocking, but it's not surprising what is happening. I've been on your show before and talked about the siege of El Fasher, 250,000 people in the city, 400,000 people moving to Tawila, where we are based in the west of the country, about 40 kilometers away. We also warned that after the siege, once the city fell, the grave danger was of mass killing, and that's what we're hearing. Let me just give you one interesting way of thinking about this. There's very few people getting out of El Fasher. Only 5,000 have made it to Tawila over the last week, and that tells us that people are being penned in, and what the stories of those who do escape tell us is that there are mass killings of the kind that you've just described going on. So at one level, you're right, this is very hard to understand, 30 million people in humanitarian need. At another level, it's the modern face of war. It's a civil war sponsored by outside powers, with the so-called international community wringing its hands on the side and not able to make a difference.
This is the important part. And I understand, given your work at the IRC, you have got to work with all sorts of parties, and you make a point of saying your job is to help people. But there is a solution to this. This is not an unsolvable problem. It does involve a lot of outside powers, including our own government. There's a way to end this. Why has it not been ended?
Well, every humanitarian emergency, Ali, is also a political emergency. The nature of that political emergency, though, is changing. 20 years ago, the word Darfur was well known in the American political and wider communities. It was a subject of intense debate. And what we're seeing now, though, is essentially the US and other parts of the international system marginalized. The UN Security Council met on Thursday. It issued a press statement, but the efforts of the international system are now focused only on the humanitarian side, and that itself is much underfunded. So there's a funding crisis as well as a political crisis. The politics centers around something that you mentioned, which is regional powers. All 10 of the neighbors of Sudan are involved in one side or the other of the conflict, and countries from the Middle East that you also mentioned are backing each side. What we're seeing, therefore, is the international system sidelined while there's a regional power grab, a regional resource grab, because there's economics in this, and deep differences within a country exploding into the kind of violence that you've described. Just remember, 5 years ago, there was a civilian government in Khartoum, in Sudan, that had overthrown the 30-year rule of the dictator al-Bashir.
What can, I mean, this is very hard, and I know you do it, but what can people who watch this do? Some people I think have catastrophe fatigue and genocide fatigue, but it's not really something we can afford to have. You can't have that. If there are people dying around the world, whatever side of the politics you're on, we can't have that. So what is somebody listening to this conversation, hearing these horrific numbers, hearing about the murders of people in a maternity hospital, what can they do to help?
I think there are three things that I'd ask people to do. First of all, get informed. Go to the IRC website, rescue.org, and read the testimony of our staff about what's happening on the ground. You can also read an explainer about where this conflict comes from. Secondly, do get in touch with your Congress people, both senators and House members. The bipartisan leaders of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee put out a statement. It's important the administration hears that the Congress cares about it, and the Congress needs to hear the people care about it. Thirdly, and obviously, I have to say that anyone with the financial means to make a difference, please help us do that, because this is a crisis that is 70% underfunded, according to what the UN says is needed by governments of the world. When governments are in retreat, we need people to step up.
I've had the privilege of meeting some of your members of the IRC who have been involved in this help. And boy, they're suffering along with it. But thank you for the work that you're doing. Thanks for joining us. David Miliband is the president
and CEO
of the International Rescue Committee. He's the author of Rescue, Refugees, and the Political Crisis of Our Time.